At 70, Kevin Costner is reportedly taking stock of the relationships that defined his remarkable four-decade career and those that ended in lasting bitterness. The actor who built an image of quiet strength and integrity in films like The Untouchables, Dances with Wolves, and Yellowstone has privately discussed who he does and doesn't want at his funeral. According to a longtime associate, Costner isn't being morbid, just pragmatic. He wants his memorial to reflect the real bonds he formed over a lifetime, not a parade of insincere Hollywood faces showing up for publicity or optics. As one friend put it, Costner's guiding principle is simple. If they didn't respect me in life, they don't belong at my funeral. Among the names reportedly mentioned, one stands out for the sting of a public humiliation that Costner has never quite forgotten: Madonna. In the early 1990s, both were at the height of their fame. Costner was riding high after directing and starring in Dances with Wolves, which won 7 Academy Awards, and leading blockbusters like Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, and The Bodyguard. Madonna, meanwhile, was redefining pop culture with her Blonde Ambition tour, captured in the controversial 1991 documentary Truth or Dare. What should have been a friendly meeting between two entertainment powerhouses instead became a moment that left a deep scar. After he and his children attended one of Madonna's concerts, going backstage to congratulate her on a performance he called neat, Madonna waited until he was gone and then turned to the camera and gagged mockingly, a moment that made it into the final cut of Truth or Dare. The scene, watched by millions, instantly painted Costner as square and unhip, while reinforcing Madonna's rebellious, cutting-edge image. For Costner, it was a deeply embarrassing episode that felt not only disrespectful to him, but also humiliating for his kids. Kevin felt ambushed and used, says a friend who was close to him then. He brought his children to meet someone he admired as an artist, and instead, he became the punchline of her film. Though Costner never lashed out publicly, those close say the incident quietly hardened him. It changed how he viewed celebrity culture, especially the performative cruelty often masquerading as humor. One longtime business associate later confided that Madonna's name came up when Costner was discussing his funeral wishes. He said something like, "I don't want anyone there who mocked me behind my back. If Madonna shows up, have security escort her out." He was half joking, but only half. The story of Costner and Madonna says much more than a grudge. It implies values that have defined the actor's life and work: dignity, authenticity, and mutual respect. Values he felt were clearly violated in that infamous moment. And though time has softened most of the actor's Hollywood rivalries, this one has gone on to linger as a reminder of how painful betrayal can be, especially in front of the world. But Madonna isn't the only star Costner reportedly wants nowhere near his final farewell. The next name on his private do not attend list belongs to an Oscar-winning actor whose off-screen alpha clash with Costner became one of Hollywood's most talked-about feuds. 2. Sean Penn, the actor whose ego clashed with his own. On paper, Kevin Costner and Sean Penn seem cut from similar Hollywood cloth. Both are serious actors with directing ambitions, firm political opinions, and reputations for being uncompromising in their artistic visions. Yet, according to insiders, these similarities have long fueled tension rather than camaraderie. 2 egos, 2 alpha males, and 2 very different worldviews, said the producer, who worked with both men. They're both incredibly talented, and both take their craft deadly seriously. That's a recipe for conflict. The roots of the reported friction between Costner and Penn are murky, with several versions making the rounds in Hollywood. Some trace it to the late 1980s and early 1990s, when both were establishing themselves as leading men of serious artistic ambition. They often competed for many of the same roles and honors, said a casting director familiar with both careers. Costner had found huge commercial success in films like Dances with Wolves and The Bodyguard, while Penn was considered the actor's actor, the choice for more intense, character-driven roles. It created a natural tension, the director said. Costner wanted the critical respect Penn had, and Penn perhaps envied Costner's mainstream appeal. Others point to their contrasting political approaches as another source of friction. While both have been outspoken on social and global issues, their styles couldn't be more different. Penn has a reputation for direct, sometimes controversial involvement, traveling to disaster zones, meeting world leaders, and courting media attention for humanitarian causes. Costner, on the other hand, represent a quieter, more traditional brand of activism, focused on environmental work, American history, and community-centered causes. Kevin and Sean represent two very different versions of Hollywood activism, said a former studio executive. Penn is hands-on and confrontational. Costner is measured and patriotic. They're both passionate, but in completely different ways. Whatever the cause, the tension reportedly hardened into mutual avoidance over the years. Though they often move in the same circles, the two have never worked together and are seldom seen at the same events. Industry watchers describe it as a cold peace, a professional courtesy that cloaks a personal disconnect. A veteran Hollywood journalist put it more candidly. They've just learned to steer clear of each other. Privately, Costner has been known to find Penn's intensity off-putting, while Penn has reportedly described Costner as too safe and conventional. This quiet but enduring standoff has apparently extended even to Costner's private thoughts about his funeral. Kevin once said he didn't want performative grief at his funeral, claimed a friend of the actor. He mentioned Penn specifically as someone who might show up to make it about himself rather than honoring their relationship, which was basically non-existent. The next name on Costner's list involves far more than a clash of personalities. It represents a painful professional fallout involving millions of dollars and the legacy of one of his most famous films. 3. Whitney Houston's estate, the legacy that turned litigious. The Bodyguard wasn't just a box office sensation. It was a cultural milestone. The 1992 romantic thriller paired Costner and Whitney Houston in a story that became a global phenomenon, producing the best-selling soundtrack of all time and solidifying both stars as international icons. Costner's emotional eulogy at Houston's 2012 funeral remains one of the most memorable tributes in Hollywood history. Yet, according to those close to him, his relationship with her estate in the years since her passing has been far more complicated. After Whitney's death, things got messy, says an entertainment lawyer familiar with the situation. Costner had been developing ideas for a sequel to The Bodyguard, something he discussed even while Houston was alive. But after she died, friction grew between him and the representatives of her estate over creative direction, financial arrangements, and the use of Houston's likeness. Kevin believed he was protecting their shared legacy, says a former business associate. He had a vision that honored Whitney's memory. But as negotiations dragged on, the tone became adversarial. Lawyers got involved. It became about contracts and control instead of love and respect. The controversy reportedly took a deep emotional toll on Costner. Friends say he was taken aback that his motives were under question and that he was represented as self-serving. He'd given one of the most heartfelt tributes at her funeral, said a source close to the actor. Then to have people from her camp accuse him of exploiting that relationship for money, it cut him to the core. The communication between Costner and the estate eventually completely broke down, and what began as a creative discussion turned into a personal disappointment. Kevin would tell friends he wouldn't want certain representatives from Whitney's estate at his funeral, said one insider. He felt they'd turn something pure, their artistic connection, into a business argument. After all he said at her funeral, the idea of them attending his felt painfully ironic. For Costner, the reported conflict with Houston's estate wasn't just a legal dispute. It was a betrayal of something deeply personal. It illustrates how Hollywood's mix of fame and money and legacy can distort even the most heartfelt partnerships. What began as one of the most celebrated artistic bonds of his career ended in disillusionment and distance, leaving behind another name on his private not welcome list. The next name on that list would take Costner back to the rugged landscapes of the American West, and to a behind-the-scenes clash with a co-star that would turn a celebrated Western into a quiet battlefield. 4. Robert Duvall, the co-star and the clashing creative vision. In 2003, Kevin Costner directed, produced, and starred in Open Range, a critically acclaimed Western that many consider one of his finest achievements. Alongside him was Robert Duvall, the revered actor whose iconic performances in The Godfather, Apocalypse Now, and Lonesome Dove had made him a legend, particularly in the Western genre. On screen, Their partnership yielded powerful results, a rich, emotionally grounded film that recalled classic Hollywood storytelling. But behind the scenes, according to several Hollywood insiders, the collaboration between these two powerhouse actors was far less harmonious. A crew member who worked on Open Range later said tension simmered throughout production. What audiences saw were two brilliant performances, the crew member remembered. What we saw was a fundamental clash of approaches that created significant tension. Costner, serving as both director and star, had a precise vision for the movie, a contemplative, visually sweeping Western that built slowly toward its climactic gunfight. Duvall, with decades of experience and his own firm beliefs about the genre, reportedly had other ideas about tone and pacing. Western legend versus Western legend, an old-school ego war, said one producer familiar with both men. Duvall is an institution. He has his way of doing things. But this was Kevin's film, his definitive Western. When those visions didn't align perfectly, sparks flew. According to insiders, the disagreements covered everything from character motivations to how certain scenes were staged and shot. Though both men remained professional, those on set described a growing unease. They were never openly hostile, said an assistant director. But you could feel the cold tension. There were curt conversations, suggestions that went ignored, and a general sense that they were working from different playbooks. What made the situation especially painful for Costner was his deep admiration for Duvall. Kevin idolized Robert's work, said a longtime friend. Getting him to join the film was a dream come true. But the experience didn't live up to that dream. It wasn't just a creative clash, it was a personal letdown. While both actors have since spoken respectfully about Open Range, those close to Costner claim the disappointment left a lasting mark. Kevin mentioned Duvall in the context of people who didn't respect his vision, said one confidant. He once said, "I don't want anyone at my funeral who didn't respect me enough to trust my direction." He wasn't angry, just quietly hurt. This episode represents a leitmotif in the life of Costner, the deep emotional investment he makes in his creative work, and conversely, the pain he feels when that trust is broken. To him, collaboration is sacred, and if it falters, the wound can linger long after the cameras stop rolling. 5. Taylor Sheridan, the modern feud that ended an empire. In 2018, Kevin Costner shocked Hollywood by signing on to star in Yellowstone, a contemporary Western series created by Taylor Sheridan for the Paramount Network. The show became a cultural juggernaut, reviving the Western genre and introducing Costner to a new generation of fans. For several seasons, it seemed like a perfect creative partnership. Sheridan's gritty storytelling paired with Costner's commanding presence as patriarch John Dutton. But as Yellowstone grew into a phenomenon, tensions began brewing behind the scenes that would eventually erupt into one of Hollywood's most public modern feuds. Behind-the-scenes drama led to Costner's explosive exit, said a Paramount executive who watched the breakdown unfold. What had started as mutual respect had slowly devolved into disagreements over creative control, scheduling, and priorities. Sheridan was expanding the Yellowstone universe with several spin-offs, while Costner was dedicating increasing blocks of time to his decades-long passion project, Horizon, a multi-part Western saga he was directing and producing. Sheridan needed Kevin fully available for filming, said a producer friendly with both men. But Kevin was just as invested in finishing Horizon. Something had to give. The clash escalated as production schedules overlapped and communication faltered. Soon, private disagreements burst into public view, with each camp feeding different narratives to the press. Things got ugly fast, remembered one veteran Hollywood reporter. Kevin was painted as uncooperative and ungrateful, while Sheridan was accused of being inflexible and power-hungry. The truth, as usual, was somewhere in between. It all came to a head with Costner's exit from the series, leaving fans crestfallen and the future of the show in doubt. But for Costner, the bottom line was not the only casualty, it was a personal blow. Kevin felt betrayed by how the story was spun, said the close associate. He felt he'd given everything he could to Yellowstone while pursuing a lifelong dream. Instead, the headlines made him look like the villain. Privately, that disappointment has reportedly colored Costner's thinking about his own legacy. He mentioned Sheridan specifically when talking about people he wouldn't want at his funeral. The same associate says, not out of bitterness, but because he felt misrepresented by someone he once trusted. The feud between Costner and Sheridan marked the end of a collaboration that had redefined both men's careers. What began as a triumph of modern television storytelling devolved into a painful public breakup, one that, for Costner, blurred the line between creative disagreement and personal betrayal. The final name on Costner's private list belongs to one of Hollywood's most celebrated leading ladies, and a series of mysterious, missed collaborations that have fueled speculation for decades. One such name, surprisingly, is Julia Roberts. During the late 1980s and the 1990s, both Costner and Roberts were towering figures in Hollywood, their parallel rises to superstardom defining an era. The fans often wondered why the two had never shared the screen, given their similar appeal and box office power. Insiders say that absence was no accident. Over the years, several projects nearly brought them together: romantic dramas, thrillers, even comedies, but every collaboration mysteriously fell apart. A veteran casting director, who had worked with both stars, once observed that when two major actors repeatedly approach project together but never follow through, it usually signals unspoken tension. Accounts differ over what went wrong. Some say early negotiations broke down over billing or salary disputes, while others point to conflicting creative visions. A few even whisper about a personal encounter that left a lingering chill between them. Whatever the truth, it seems the tension endured in silence for decades, with both maintaining public cordiality but keeping well out of each other's way in private. According to one good friend, Costner once remarked, "If she didn't want to make a movie with me when I was alive, I don't need her at my funeral pretending she cared." Whether his remark is serious or half in jest, it reflects his sensitivity to perceived rejection and his adherence to an ethic of authenticity in relationships, professional or otherwise. The 6 names that were reportedly off Costner's imagined guest list each represent a different chapter of disillusionment in his career. From Madonna's infamous mockery of him in her documentary Truth or Dare, to Taylor Sheridan's high-profile creative fallout on Yellowstone. From Sean Penn's intense rivalry to the complicated legacy with Whitney Houston's estate, these conflicts reveal the personal toll of Costner's integrity in an industry where compromise often rules. A director who has worked closely with him once said, "Kevin has a moral compass most people in Hollywood don't. When someone violates his sense of respect or fairness, it cuts deep, and he doesn't easily forgive." This has been a principled stance, and one that sometimes comes at a cost. Costner's refusal to play politics or turn a blind eye to disrespect has alienated powerful figures who could have furthered his career. But it has earned him enduring loyalty from those who share his values. Many actors, crew members, and collaborators who've worked with him speak of his fairness, transparency, and genuine appreciation for hard work. For every person on his not welcome list, one producer noted, there are dozens who would drop everything to work with him again. In his 70s, Costner seems more focused than ever on legacy and truth. The work on Yellowstone, the ambitious Horizon project, demonstrates a man determined to live and work on his own terms. Friends say the thoughts about his funeral reflect this same drive for authenticity. He doesn't want some spectacle full of industry pretenders and empty tributes. He wants a farewell defined by real relationships, genuine emotion, and truth. But behind that stoic cowboy image lies a deeply sensitive and introspective man. Those closest to Costner describe someone who feels deeply, who is wounded by betrayal and haunted by disrespect even decades later. "People think of Kevin as the unshakable, strong, silent type," said one longtime friend. But he feels things more deeply than most. Criticism hurts him. Betrayal stays with him. He just doesn't show it publicly. That combination of emotional depth and quiet resilience has defined his life as much as his career. Whether through successes or failures, Oscar wins for Dances with Wolves, box office disasters like Waterworld, painful divorces, and career reinventions, it's a sense of integrity upon which Costner has relied to keep going. He remembers every slight but never lets them break him. Instead, he moves on, creating work that matters and being around people who are real. As he has aged, his circle has shrunk, his focus sharper. He invests only in relationships that bring honesty and value. In the end, Kevin Costner's so-called funeral list isn't about revenge or bitterness. It's about authenticity. It's about wanting his final farewell to reflect the truth of his life rather than the illusions of Hollywood. As one friend put it, Kevin has always seen through the artifice. He's built a career by being real, and he wants his ending to be real too. For a man who has spent his life portraying integrity on screen, it seems only fitting that he insists on it, even in death.